Sorry, I'm trying to get my thing to show here so I can get this on my screen for you. Give me 1 second. Welcome. I need to share my screen over here. I'm a little discombobulated today because we were just having some technical issues with power. For some reason, my power bar decided to die last night, my power source, and then my power bar today. So we were scrambling to get things plugged in and get me power. So here I am, powered up. And welcome to Digital Photo Mentors weekly live stream. Photo editing. I am going to be working on subscriber submitted images today, as usual, and you can submit your images using the link that you should see right there on the screen. So I'm sure that we have a lot of our regulars here, and I'm going to be right back in Lightroom to get started and say hello to everybody. So give me 2 seconds, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. All right, so I've got some great images again this week. And let's see who's in our chat. As Rob said, yes, we had some challenges this morning. Everything works great technology wise until you're trying to do something on a schedule, and then of course it doesn't work. Welcome from Ireland and a rainy Ireland. We've actually got sun today. Catherine, cold and wet in Texas. Yes, it's sunny but icy. Exactly, that's what we got today in Edmonton, St. Louis. And I know that Marguerite was here early, so I told her that we were going to be running a bit late, and thanks for hanging in there with us. So I'm just curious. Ooh, South Africa is in the house. Welcome. Welcome, Peter. I'm curious how many of you attended the Photoshop 101 class 2 days ago, because we put a call out at the end of that class to come join this live. So I'd love to hear if you were part of that class. If you weren't, the class will be available shortly as a recorded version. Rob is working on those now, and those will be available. I should be able to give you a link to that next week, and also the Photoshop 201 class. So if you're interested in learning Photoshop, then you can sign up for Photoshop 201. If you can share a link to that in the chat, please, Rob. And we have 2 options for you to sign up. Catherine was at that class, and she said it was great. Thanks, Catherine. Yes, I remember that you were there. So I hope you've signed up for 201. Rob's going to be sharing a link to that shortly. So again, if you're new here, please remember to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel and set that little notifications, because then you will be notified or pinged by YouTube when I have a new video or when I'm going live. Deb was there. Awesome. I got one of your images for today, Deb, as well as Anne. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a few attendees. So glad you could all join us today. So what I'm going to get started with is, as I mentioned in the Photoshop class, my workflow is usually Lightroom is my main editor. So I bring everything into Lightroom, and you can see on the screen here. And then I do my sorting, I do my collections and things like that. And then I decide how I'm going to edit the image. I will do partly in Lightroom, do my basic edits, and then I may hop over to a plugin like Luminar or Topaz if I need to do sharpening or denoise, or I may hop over to Photoshop if I want to do complete non-destructive editing or do some complex editing with layers in Photoshop. Vicky was there as well. Awesome. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to start with Deb's image since she's here. And I'm guessing this is a lovely image in Alaska. And you had said in your notes with the image submission that you wanted to bring the fog out more. So let's see if we can't do that. Remind me what software you are using, Deb. I think I can look that up on your sheet here. Luminar Classic as your main. Okay, perfect. So that's what we're going to do, and then possibly hop over to Luminar, right? If a lot of you have pre-ordered Luminar Neo, you may have received some information that some people who did the early bird purchase have already received it. the rest of you should receive it on the 17th. Okay, so if you haven't gotten Luminar Neo yet, Holly's in the group here. She's in the chat, and I believe that she's gotten her hands on Luminar Neo and she was installing. So let us know how that went, Holly, if you were successful with that. But I'm not allowed to show anything with it yet, unfortunately. So I'm under embargo, which means I can't demonstrate it yet. So I can still show you Luminar AI, but I can't show you Luminar Neo today. So first thing I'm going to start with when we are in Lightroom is I'm going to change the camera profile. Okay, so the first thing you do, if you just pull this menu down here, let me get my cursor highlight on. There we go. So if you just pull this menu down under the basic panel where it says profile, right, you'll see it only shows the Adobe ones, right? If you want to see more, you can choose browse, or just click this little 4 squares. It's like thumbnails, okay? And then it's going to show you the camera matching profiles. Just by hovering over, you can see that it changes the look of the image. Okay, so we could go with vivid, but I usually like to go with landscape, especially for ones like this, because look what it does to the contrast, and it's already bringing that fog out. So one step closer to what her goal was of bringing the fog out more, okay? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the white and the black points. And I have a feeling that just by doing what's called the black point, the fog is going to come out even more. Okay? Because for the fog to come out, what we need to have happen is we need something dark behind it. Okay. Actually, if you want to find, there's an article on our website, Rob, about how to photograph smoke. I think it was done by a guest by Wanucho, I think is his name, Wanucho. And it talks about photographing smoke where you have to have backlight behind the smoke and something dark. Okay, so that's kind of the situation here with the fog, right? Quick question I'll answer for Vivian here. Since you've got your hands on Luminar Neo, no problems loading. Excellent. Not sure how to get the templates into Neo. So they've only converted some of them so far. They will be, I believe, coming out with some sort of a conversion tool to convert all of the ones that you had in Luminar AI to Luminar Neo. But that hasn't come out yet with this first release. You installed the QR code, the share feature worked. Awesome. Okay, cool. But at least it's installed and you got the first things going. So a couple of good news from both ladies there that Neo is working for them. So that's good. Right, so what I'm going to do, Rob shared that link to the smoke article. I'm going to set the black point. And if you remember, if you've watched before, I'm going to hold the shift key and then double click on the word blacks. Okay, so see what happened. I'm just going to undo. Watch two things. Watch the histogram, okay? And the black slider is going to hop when I do that. So I'm holding shift, double click, and now look at how much richer, that's before and after, okay? How much richer it is. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop a little bit because two things. There's a little tuft of grass over here, and there's this little kind of stick over here, but I'm going to crop in to bring this boater and the fog, make it a little bit larger. Okay, so part of the reason why the fog isn't showing up is that it's small. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to leave this aspect ratio locked. I'm going to come in so I have something like that. Okay, so I want to keep this boater over in this thirds, rule of thirds, and I'm going to crop so that this stick is out. Okay, the other way I could go is to leave my boater sort of in the third here, and I can't tell if the horizon, if the horizon matches the lake or not. Okay, it's a tricky one. So deciding whether this one is crooked is a little bit tricky and subjective. So I'm going to tilt it a little bit and see what that looks like. Right? It feels straighter, right? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some graduated filters. We can bring the highlights down as well. Okay? I'm just hitting my Alt Option key to see if there's anything clipping, and there is not. So I'm going to pull the highlights down, and you can see what that's doing is it's darkening the bit of the lake and a little bit of the sky. Okay? I'm also going to do a shift double click on the whites as well. Okay, so we've done a profile and a couple of sliders, and it's already looking much punchier. Right? let's get rid of this stick thing over here. So I'm going to use the cloning tool or the healing tool. So I opened that by hitting the Q key on the keyboard. That's the shortcut. And I'm just going to draw over it and see how well it does. Okay, so the problem is that it's got the mountain in kind of in the edge here. So I'm going to tickle it right out. I'm just going to do it 2 pieces. So I'm going to do the part that's under the mountain first. Right? And then I'm going to do this part here. And I'm going to have to try and line it up so that the edge of the mountain, see how that works? Fills in the edge of the mountain down there, like that. And then I can just draw a third one in here. And so see how Lightroom chooses, when I click to draw a line, right? It chooses the source point. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me zoom in here. No, it's not letting me zoom in. There we go. Okay, so see how it chooses, this is the source going to this spot. So you see this arrow, okay? So Lightroom chooses the source, but you can move it around if you don't like the source that it's chosen. You can also move the spot that you're cloning after the fact as well. Okay, so you've got full control over adjusting the points even after you set them. Okay, I'm just checking all the points. There's one more here. I'm trying to get this other one. It's not letting me get to it. It's tricky when the points overlap. Okay, so I'm going to try and get this one up a little higher like that, and then maybe draw one more. Ideally, I could use Photoshop to clone this out and do a better job, but that's not too bad. Okay, it's going to do the trick. And then we'll leave a little bit of grass there. Right. Next thing I want to do is darken that sky. So I'm going to use a mask here because if I go down as far as I can with the highlights, it's still not darkening the sky as much as I would like. So I'm going to go masking tools, select, oops, I'm going to undo that. Selected the wrong thing. Select sky. We'll come back to subject in a minute. Okay, so now it's selected the sky, but I actually want to add this part as well, the mountain part as well. So I'm going to add. Now we have to decide, how do I do an add? I want to do, I could do a radio filter, but then I might get the trees, okay? I could try color range and see if it just picks the sky, or I could do luminance range. So I'm going to try color range, and then you just click and drag a little square, right? Now you'll notice that it also selected this bit down here in the water. So I'm going to leave it for now, but let's just see if I can mask that a little bit. So just by adjusting this slider, I get a little bit less of the water. I'm making sure that I don't have the trees, right? And now I'm going to bring the exposure down and the highlights down, right? Now it's actually darkened the bottom. And let's see what it's doing. So I think I'm going to leave it because it's actually bringing the highlight out and the reflection more, and it's done a good job here. I'm also going to increase the clarity and maybe even the dehaze a little bit. Oh yeah, dehaze does a nice job. Look at that. Okay, so be careful of going too far. That's too far, right? Dehaze does a nice job because it's adding sort of some of these blacks back in and giving me depth. And now I've noticed a new problem that I'm going to fix. Okay, so see the difference there. Right, so now our little canoer is really coming out more. And you see what I've noticed here is you've got some spots, okay? So these kinds of spots are likely on the lens, okay? Dust spots are usually more smaller, okay? When they're round like this, this looks like water spots on your lens. So check your lens, Deb, and look at the front and the back because it looks like you've got some spots here, okay? You can also turn on the toolbar. I did that by hitting T, right? Or you can go up here and choose toolbar up here, right? And visualize spots. And then what that does is it allows you to see sort of in a black and white version where all the spots are, okay? So if you can't see them visually, it's going to try and get rid of. So you can see you've got quite a few spots. Let's just see how that's looking. And there's looks like a couple of white ones here, so we'll get rid of those. Yeah, you've got lots of these little blobs, so definitely a lens cleaning is in order here. Now, I'm not the best one to lead by example there. I tend to forget to do that myself, and I'm a little bit lazy on that end. So do as I say, not as I do. Right, I've still got some weird stuff going on up here. Let's see if we can get rid of that. Okay. Yeah, and there's some spots up in the sky too. So make sure you keep going and get rid of all the spots. Definitely the ones that are super visible. And you may find, like as I did here, that as I darkened the image, they showed up more. Okay? So they weren't visible prior to me doing some of these corrections. Okay? All right, that's like we got most of the spots. Because now it looks like there's some sort of a little highlight or something here as well. Maybe a little bit of lens flare. So we could try and get rid of that. And all I'm going to do is just try and get the edge toned down. Okay, so see how that shows a spot way over here. I'll bring that over here. I'm just sort of trying to tone down the edge of it. See that? So it's not so obvious. Let's take another one. So you can do cloning with Lightroom. It's just a little bit clunky, right? You could probably do a much better job with this in Photoshop. Well, I know you could, or even in Luminar with the erase tool. Okay, so that's looking better. So you notice that as I darkened, those spots showed up, and so did our fog, and so did our little canoer. Okay. I'm going to go back in and crop a little bit more, and I'm going to decide to take this total reflection out. These bright spots down at the bottom here are really taken away from the canoer as well, okay, because they're bright and your eye goes there. So I could either take them out like this, or we could add another edge vignette using a linear gradient. Okay, so we're going to come up from the bottom. So where we click and drag, linear gradient. And I'm going to do highlights again and lower this. Now look at that fog. There we go. Bring the contrast down. And I'm going to bring the texture down a little bit on this bottom part here. Let's take it to extreme. There we go. See, I'm still not happy with this water because it's still taking a lot of attention. Let's do my upside down trick. Okay, so turn the image upside down, and I'm just hitting Command or Control and the square bracket keys to do that. And when we look at it upside down, where does your eye go? Whoops. Where does your eye go now? Right? I'm just going to take myself off the screen so you can see just the image. It does go to the boater for sure, but are we still kind of going to that upper right corner right now, which is where that reflection in the water is? Right? So I'm trying to do all of these edits to bring our attention to the fog and the canoer. Okay? Let's bring our menu back, turn them right side up. Right? But how is that looking so far? Right? Deb says, yes, Neo does wonders with the spots. Yes, it sure does. So I could definitely have pulled this over to Neo and got. Sorry about that. Apparently I clicked something and took myself out. I am back. Sorry about that. Am I still here? Or is everybody can still see me? I'm back. Okay. Yes, I could have done that with Neo with one click. Apparently when I do back on my mouse, that is not a good thing. Let's get back in here. Oh, yes, we can see lots of little speckles and things in there. All right. It's still drawing. Perfect. Okay. Am I back? Can you all see me? Okay. I'm good. All right. Let's see. Pakistan, Farhan. I missed that. Where are you from? Pakistan. Welcome. What time is it in Pakistan? Okay, let's is this view better or is this view better? I think maybe this one is better because then I'm not over top of the screen of what I'm doing. So I'm going to go with this one. Right? So that's Deb's image. And I think that one looks about right. Now, the other thing we could do with this one is we could actually do an extreme crop. Okay, so we could do something completely different and just get rid of the sky and do something really elongated and panorama. Right? How does that look? Ugh. Sorry, if I press it too many times, for some reason it removes it from my collection. What do you think of that? Let's do a comparison and a vote. Oh my goodness. Can I have any more technical issues today? All right, I'm going to make a duplicate. And I'm just going to go back in my history over here on this one. Okay, because there's no history on the one I just made. Let's go back to this one and compare. So tell me which version you prefer. Do you prefer the one on the left that has the sky, or do you like the panoramic version? Okay. I'm going to vote for the panoramic version. Rob is reminding everybody to give a thumbs up. Thank you very much for those of you that have already done that. Deb likes the panoramic one. Well, it's your image, so your vote counts more than everybody else's. So you can give that a try. Part of the reason why I wanted to do the panoramic is because the sky and the fog are sort of competing because they're both interesting and bright, right? And by eliminating the sky, we focus right down on the canoe and that fog. Another vote for panoramic. Another vote for panoramic. Okay, so we've got the worldwide vote. Hi, Trish. Trish is down under in New Zealand. New Zealand, right? So we've got the worldwide vote on the panoramic, right? Awesome. All right, let's move on to another image. So again, Deb, your homework is to try and replicate that and do something similar and see where you go with that. You might even want to try black and white. That's something that I didn't try yet, and that works well as well. So because this one is all about tones and the fog is light and dark, the black and white and the simplification can work well. Okay. All right, let's get back here. Let's see. I don't know if Rita is here today. Have we seen Rita yet? She had a question about snow, so I'm going to leave that one until she's here. AJ sent in this image. I haven't seen AJ today. Are you with us, AJ? So this is kind of a neat image, I thought. He's got these weeds framed through this old fence, which has lots of texture and things on it. So let's see what we can do with this image, right? The other thing you could do before we leave, I'm still thinking about Deb's image because it's a really cool image. You could take that over to Luminar and add my favorite filter, which is the demystify or the mystify, and add some of that blur. And you can even add the atmosphere tool. We'll come back to that one. Let's just see. I'm still thinking about yours. I still might do another little trick on that one. But you could add some more atmosphere using the tools inside of Neo or Luminar AI. Same tools. All right, same workflow. Camera profile. We'll choose landscape. See how that adds more contrast. I'm going to go with the landscape one. And then we're going to bring some of that detail back that we just lost in these dark areas. Okay. So overall, I'm just going to give it a bit more exposure. I'm going to give it a bit more shadows. And let's see. We do have a bit of clipping in the sky. I press the J key to see the clippings. Hold the Alt Option key down and slide the highlights to the left, so darkening, just until I get rid of that clipping. You can see that AJ's got some spots as well. Okay, so again, Neo would do a great job on removing these spots with one click. Let's check my black. So I'm going to shift double click. Okay, so now we've got lots of contrast. maybe too much contrast. So we can go back and choose a different profile. Let's go back to standard. Okay. So again, editing is often a dance where you choose one thing and then you do an edit and then you do a couple more edits and you have to go back to the first one to make an adjustment. Okay. So don't be afraid of going back to where you started to adjust things that you did first. Right. So this is looking pretty good. We've got some nice color. We've got some nice detail. Let's get more out of this sky here. So I'm going to choose masking sky. And I'm just going to move this so we can see that corner. So I'm going to pull the highlights down more. Look at what job that does. That's great. And darken even a little bit more. Now you can see more spots again. Okay. I'm going to give it a bit of clarity and a bit of dehaze. So dehaze does a really nice job on skies. And if you're using this in Luminar, they've got the AI tool and the Sky AI, which will do this automatically. I can also see some flare and some more spots. So that's kind of done a good job here. Let's go and deal with some of these spots. Okay, so AJ needs to clean his lens and possibly his sensor as well. Okay, so you can see all these spots. Lots of spots. So today we've got dirty sensor, dirty lens lesson. Clean your gear. Okay, now this here streak looks like a sun streak. And this is a sun flare. Okay, so this is the sun hitting the lens. So you can decide to keep it or clone it out. I think in this case, it's not adding to the image. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Okay, and now that I'm zoomed in, I can also see, I'm closing this tool with the Q keyboard shortcut. Rob, if you could share a link to our Lightroom keyboard shortcut cheat sheet that is available for download. Holly says she thinks of me every time I say mystical because it's my favorite. Thanks, Holly. Are you wearing your hat? Stephanie's in the house. I think I have one of your images as well, Stephanie. So once I've zoomed in here, I can see another issue that I want to correct. Does anybody know what I'm looking at here? Any ideas? I've talked about this one before, and I'm going to zoom in more so it's obvious. Does anybody see anything there to edit? Let me give you a hint. It's on the edges of the fence. On the edges of the fence. What am I going to use to fix this? Do you see this little purple fringe here? And over here it's green. Okay. Anybody know what that's called? That's under the lens corrections. Okay. And when I'm shooting Fuji, it actually does that automatically because the lens profile is built into Lightroom. It does that automatically. Okay, so Rob is giving the answer. Check off chromatic aberration. Right, so right there. Okay, look at how simple that is. Right, just one checkbox. Okay, I'm also going to enable the profile, and you'll see how it sort of straightens out the edges a little bit. Straightens out the edges from distortion and also from edge vignetting. Okay. Because often with a wide lens, you get some edge vignetting. This one was taken with, let's see, 12 millimeter lens, so quite wide, right? On a Nikon D7 7200. Okay, so it's a 12 millimeter lens on a crop sensor camera. Okay, and if you could share that information on crop sensors, Rob, there's an article on that one. Okay, to explain the difference on that. So 12 millimeter lens. I just saw another little lens flare thing here. Okay, so there's a few of these little artifacts showing up. So again, you get to decide if you want to keep them or get rid of them. Okay, I'm going to try and just make it look like it blends with that other grass a little better. Okay, see how I'm moving the spot around and I'm trying to match up this line right here so that it looks like the grass is continued. Okay, and then there's another one here. Let's do that one. So Lightroom is picking the wrong spot. I'm just going to tell it a different spot. Okay. All right, we're getting close now. There's another sunflower over here. See that? Let me zoom out just a bit. There's another sunflower there. So there's two ways we could go about this. We could leave the sunflowers over here, or we could bring this into Luminar and actually add some more. Okay. But let's work on the fence and these little leafy things. Okay, so now I'm going to go select subject with a new mask and let's see what it picks. Not very much. So it didn't pick very much. I was hoping it would get the whole fence, which it did not. Okay, so we could add to this with a radial gradient or two. Okay, so I just want to get most of this fence. That's not bad. Let's add one more radial gradient. So I'm just trying to get the fence and maybe some of these grasses in here like that. That looks pretty good. There, how's that? Okay, so we're not pretty close. Still didn't get these ones here, so I can also try a color range. But I'm afraid that if I do that, it's going to select everything. Yes, so it's not getting what I want there, so I'm not going to keep that one. All right, so sometimes it's a trial and error thing with these masks. I want to be able to get this one here. Let's try luminance. Okay, so now it still gets this part over here, which I don't want, but it's gotten a bit more of the leaves. So let me just see if I can expand that a little bit. I'm looking at the leaves and the fence, right? And then I'm just going to do a subtract. So this one has gotten a little bit complicated. I'm going to add a subtract. I'm going to subtract a linear gradient from over here. Okay, so I don't want it affecting this side of the image. Okay? So I'm trying to select the fence and the weedy things, right? So now I've kind of done a decent job of that. Okay? Now that I've got the selection that I want, now I'm going to turn up the texture and the clarity. Okay, can you see what that's doing to the fence? Off, on. Okay, so I'm just giving it some punch. So all of those pieces that I put together to make that selection for that mask was to get the fence, not the sky, and not the grass over on the right. Right? Let's take a look. Before and after. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze. Before and after. So we've taken care of that bright sky and the contrast. Okay? But where's our eye going? Okay? Is it the subject here, these little mossy things or these lichens on the wood? Is it the leaves? Okay? I want to try something with this one. And I'm going to try flipping it. Oops, not that way. Flip horizontal. Okay? Because I want to see if that takes my eye more into those leaves. Okay, so the other way, I felt like the fence was leading us to the end of the fence. Okay, I'm pointing at my screen. I feel like it was leading us to the end of the fence. Now I feel like the fence is leading us to the leaves, which are now leaning that way. Right, I'm going to do a crop on this one, because there's a whole bunch of stuff over here that really we don't need. It doesn't add to the image. So let's just see what happens if we come all the way in here. Okay. How's that? Okay, so now your eye comes in from the left, because we read left to right, follows along the fence, goes, oh, that's interesting, goes, oh, that's interesting, and then you sort of stay here. Okay, so I think this flipped version is more interesting and keeps your eye in the picture. I'm going to add a little edge vignette here. I see some more spots. Okay, so be really conscious of the spots. We could also go back and darken the sky a little bit more. Okay, so I've already had the sky selected. I just have to go back to that mask. And let's darken the sky a little bit more. Now those leafy things and the wood stand out more than the sky does. Okay. One more adjustment on the sky. I'm going to give a little bit of highlights back so it's not so flat. A little bit of white. Okay, so before, after. So a lot of editing is all about tone control. I use that phrase a lot. right? Because tone control is to control where the viewer's eye is going, right? Let's take a look at a comparison on this one. Okay, I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to go back again in the history. Right, so the other thing you can do besides making a virtual copy, and how I did that was I just did Command or Control apostrophe, or you can right click, create virtual copy. So you can create virtual copies, or you can make snapshots. Okay, snapshots are harder to compare side by side though. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to the uncropped version and flip it back, and let's compare. Okay. I'll show you a snapshot in a moment. Okay, so now, which version does everybody prefer? Do you prefer the left original cropping and original orientation, or do you prefer the cropped flipped version? Okay, so keep in mind, I changed the aspect ratio on the flipped version, right? So it's not the same proportions, but that's okay. But if I want to change the proportions on it back to the original, I certainly could do that. Okay, so I can just say as original and just Command overall. And in which case I would take some off the bottom. Okay. So now they've got the same aspect ratio, and that works too. A couple of votes. Flipped version for Marguerite. Cropped flipped for Deb. Cropped and flipped, right? So I wasn't planning on doing a lesson on cropping and flipping today, but keep the things in mind that, you can do this if it makes the image more effective, okay? Rob's got to be the odd man out and say original. Cropped, the right one. Flip and crop, improved it. Catherine says, the flipped version focuses more on the fence and the weeds and plays down the sky that's slightly different on the other side of the fence. Yeah, it is. It's got a different color, too. It's like the sun is sitting there, right? Sorry, Rob. I think you're outvoted. Oh, Holly's going to vote with Rob. The original, because a thicker part of the wood is in the foreground. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Leading lines work more naturally in the original, Rob says. And her eyes are going from thicker to thinner. Okay, so we've got 3 votes that agree with Rob, 3 votes for original, and then a few votes for the flipped one. Okay, so if this is AJ's image, so if AJ was here, he would get to choose which version he liked. But I just like to show options and things of what's possible if you get into doing thinking of this way. Okay, so think about these possibilities and how you can apply that to your image. Okay? I'm going to actually go back to Deb's image because I want to see what we can do with this fog. I'm going to crop again, give it a little more space on the bottom. And let's go to Luminar and do what I said. Okay, so let's go to Luminar AI. And again, I'm just using AI because technically I'm not allowed to demonstrate Neo yet. I do have it, but we're not allowed to demonstrate it yet. Don't ask me why. So I'd love to be able to do a tutorial for you all on Luminar Neo, but that will be coming soon. We also have our Luminar Neo course actually available now for pre-sale. So if you want to link to that, Rob, we will be doing the way that the course is going to go. And if you pulled the plug on that, Holly, and did buy the course, we're going to be changing the dates a little bit because we don't have a lot of time to make the course by the end of the month. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the videos and drip them out to everybody that's pre-ordered it. So you'll be able to start watching the videos. And also, thanks, Holly. I knew that you would. We're going to drip the videos out and you'll be able to start watching them as I'm producing them. And then we're going to have the live sessions where we'll watch the videos together and then you can have you can do Q&A. Okay, so if you pre-order like Holly just did, you'll be able to pay $59, and the price later when it comes out will be a little bit more, probably $69 or $79. Okay, and the full regular price will be $99 or $97. So there's the link Rob has put in the chat if you want to pre-order the Luminar Neo course, and as soon as we make some videos and start getting them up, you will have access to them if you pre-order it. Okay, so now I've got this image back into Luminar, and of course I'm going to do my favorite mystical. So it really does make things mystical. I just like it. Okay, so let's do that. And let's go to the atmosphere AI under creative, because this is the one that I was thinking about. Okay, so let's see what happens. We can add fog, but we can also choose where it goes. Okay, so there's fog, layered fog. Let's see where that one's going. Okay, so that's actually adding to the actual fog in the middle. So look at that. Okay, so it's making more fog in the very center. Okay, so we can actually enhance that glow of the fog. Let's see what mist does. No, we don't want it on the top of the image. Okay, let's see what that one does. That one actually works well as also. So see how it's enhancing the fog that's already there? Okay. Let's just see a quick before and after. So this is what we're getting from Luminar. Okay, so maybe not the fog. I think I like this one. I like the layered fog the best. So it's just adding an ever so slightly enhancement. I'm going to go back over here to the light panel just to make sure I am not losing any of the highlights. Okay, Jay works in Luminar as well to show clipping. So there's lots of detail in those highlights. Okay, and I'm going to show you a different way to keep highlight detail. Go to the super contrast under the professional tools, and this one is in Neo as well. Okay, dial up the highlight contrast. So this is how I use this tool. Put it to 50 on the amount, and then play with the balance. So when you go to the right, it's darkening. When you go to the left, it's brightening. Okay, so in this case, I know that I want to darken it so that I don't lose those highlights. Right. So I'm going to go to the right, and then I'm just going to play with this top slider to decide how much. Okay. Let's go somewhere in there. I'm going to scale back my mystical just a tiny bit now. Okay, so now we've really got some more fog. And I can also mask it. Okay, so if I don't want the mystical on the actual fog itself, because it's kind of making it too blurry, let's just do a strip of masking. I'm always looking at the before and after. Okay, before and after. Let's try while we're in here. Dramatic is another one that might work here because it sort of adds local contrast. Yeah, look what that's doing. Okay. So I'm literally just sort of playing around. See how I go from one end of the slider to the other? Okay. So I just want to see what it's doing, and that's the easiest way to do that. Okay, what's this doing? Look at that, brings out the fog. So maybe I'm going to leave that higher. Okay, and I don't like what it's doing up here, but I sure like what it's doing on the fog. So guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint this one into the fog. Okay, so notice I painted out on the other one because I didn't want the fog as blurry. And now I just want this effect on the fog, so I painted it in. Okay. Again, I'm always checking the tools. What are the tools doing? Okay. Maybe give the fog a little more color. And the last one I was going to play with is mood. Right? What if we want to do a lot? Okay, is there anything in here that sort of grabs me? I'm just going to scroll through. Pink is kind of interesting. Not so much. So not really grabbing me. Let's see about cross processing. I'm going really fast here. That one's actually not bad. Let's dial it down a bit. Okay, so there's our before, after. Let's apply it and go back to Lightroom and compare it. Okay. Nice, Holly. Keep himself looking mystical. Yeah, his cigar in his profile. He thinks he's mystical with his cigar. All right, should pop back into Lightroom. Yes, there it is. Okay, so let's compare these two. So the one on the top is the Lightroom one, and the one on the bottom is the Luminar one. So it's subtle, but we've added a bit more contrast in the fog, brought a bit more detail out in the fog. Again, very subtle, right? But the tools that I use there would apply really well on this image because of the fog. All right, let's see if we have time for one more. I can't really go along today because I have another appointment. I know Rita had asked about editing snow, but I don't want to do this one when she's not here. Let's do this little spider guy. So this is one that was sent in by Ron. And we haven't seen him lately in Australia. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So he's got the camera neutral profile. Let's see what the others look like. So landscape, you'll see gives more greens. Portrait brings out the purple more because it brings out yellow, oranges and things. Faithful is sort of drab. So let's go with the landscape. And let's check the white. So I think I had done some edits on this one previously. Aha, yes, I did. Okay, I'm just going to reset this one. So we'll go landscape. And you can see that this image is underexposed. And how you can tell is there's this gap on the histogram. Okay, if you could please share the article that we have on the histogram, Rob, the one about your snow is gray. Okay, so you can tell that it's underexposed because there's room for the graph to go this way. Okay, there's a gap. So I'm going to do a shift key, hold it down, double click on the word whites. Okay, now you'll see the graph is touching the edge of the right side of the histogram. Okay. Drinking my cold coffee. Then I'm going to bring the exposure up a tiny little bit. Okay, so notice I've only brought the exposure up half a stop or 0.05 or 0.5 because I brought the whites up. Okay, if I undo those steps and I try and do it just with exposure, okay, it tends to blow out things and it flatten it out. Now I'm at 0.1, 1.0, so one stop, right? But I still have a flat image. Okay, by doing the shift double click on the whites first, then exposure, you get that contrast maintained. Okay? Then I just do a quick little alt on the slider for the blacks. Okay? Let's take a look at cropping next. Okay? The spider is sort of in the middle, side to side. He's up on the third on the top. So let's just kind of crop so that he becomes a little bit more off-centered. I find a lot of this stuff over on the right is distracting, and the lines of the flower lead to him. And I like the idea of having this other flower up here to sort of mirror the shape. So let's just crop. I'm going to hold down the shift key while I crop. I'm going to crop from there. Maybe we can get rid of that other flower. Actually, let's try this. So we're cropping into the bottom of this one and getting that spider a little bit more on that third. Okay, let's see what that looks like. That's kind of an interesting composition. I'm going to clone out this spot here or use the healing tool just because it's distracting. And I want to darken this flower. Okay, so I know I'm going to do a mask, but I don't want to do color range because it's going to get both flowers. So I'm just going to do a linear gradient or a radial gradient. Either will work here. Okay, so if I do a linear gradient, just like that, and then I bring highlights down, and you can see that it's applying to the flower. I can even lower the clarity and the sharpness so that flower becomes a little bit more blurry as well. Okay. Let's try select subject and see if it selects that whole flower and the spider. It did. Right, now my overlay is green, so it's sort of making everything look a funny color. So I'm just going to change the overlay to red. And what do I want to do here? I want to give it a bit more texture and clarity. Okay. I am going to pull the highlights down a tiny bit because look what happens. That flower gets more color. Okay, so remember when things are sort of faded out or washed out, this applies to your sunsets as well. When things are overly bright or overexposed, the color will look pastel. Okay, so when we bring that highlights down on this flower, you see the difference between it sort of looking faded and having more color with the purple just by affecting the highlights. Okay, well, that looks good. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to select the subject again. And why I'm doing this is I'm going to invert it. Okay, so it's going to select everything else. Right now I'm really going to bring the highlights down because I want to minimize, again, those highlights in the background, the greens and so on, and bring the attention to the middle flower. Okay, I'm also going to de-sharpen using clarity and sharpen to the minus side. Okay? Maybe a little bit less on the highlights. So let's take a look. Okay, so just minimizing those edge things. Okay, so it's kind of like doing an edge vignette and bringing that flower out. Okay, so let's take a look at the before. So a little dark, the spider's kind of lost, and now we've really brought him out. Okay. I think that's about all I would do to this image. Again, it's just tone control, okay? So tone control is really the majority of the things that you want to do with your images to bring out the subject. So you decide, first of all, what is subject? What do I want people to look at here? And how do I make that thing stand out? Then approach your editing from that perspective. Okay. Is that helpful? How many people find that helpful? If you find that helpful, please put that information. Just say, yes, I find that helpful in the chat. I'm going to do one more real quick one. This is by Canuck Don, okay? Because I think we had 2 Dons at one point. And I'm going to just run through the same process, okay? So he's done a Fuji file. I'm going to change the profile to Astia. I am going to correct the tilt here. Now, you can try to correct the tilt 2 ways, right? I can say auto, and let's see what it does, right? Now you'll notice that it's going based on the horizon, okay? If I try and do it based on this log here, right, now we got wonky horizon, okay? So keep in mind that if you're going to use the ruler to straighten verticals or horizontals, make sure that they are actually straight, okay? So the horizon is generally not going to lead you astray, right? So if we straighten based on that, right, you can tell now that that post is definitely not perpendicular to the ground, right? I'm going to crop in a little bit because our seagull is right in the middle again. So I'm going to hold shift down to keep the aspect ratio the same. And I'm just getting rid of some of the space on the left or behind him, okay, so that he's got space to look in front of him. Okay, so when you're cropping, make sure your subject has space in front of them. Okay. Now when I'm looking at this, I can see just a tiny bit of sky, and it kind of bugs me. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Okay. So see how that sky is just one more layer of something to take away from the subject. Okay. Now let's see what happens. We shift double click on both of those. I'm going to check the highlights for clipping. Make sure I have highlights in the bird. Color balance looks okay. Maybe let's try daylight. I find daylight usually does a pretty good job, but it adds a bit too much magenta for my liking. And in this case, it's a bit on the yellow side. That's not too bad. Okay. Now I want to darken the grass. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we could do that, right? We could do a mask and choose color range, or we can just go down to our HSL panel and play with the sliders. Okay, so luminance is brightness, and I know that the grass is going to have some green. Okay, but look, it's got more yellow. Okay, so there's more yellow in the grass. And often what I like to do with grass is leave the yellow sort of brighter, and then it gives it more contrast. See how flat it looks? So I'll leave the yellow higher and then darken the green. And I'm going to take some saturation out of the yellow. So let's take a look at the difference. Okay, so without doing any kind of masking at all, that's doing a great job. There might even be some orange in there. Looks like some orange, right? So see how the orange adds that depth back in here, right? So I'm trying to make sure that I don't make a blob like that. Okay, so I want to make sure that there's still some highlights and shadows. Let's see if there's any red. No, not really. Okay, blue is going to darken the water as expected, which is not a bad thing. The bird comes out a little bit more as well. Okay, so just using the HSL panel, we've done a lot of work on the greens and the grass. And I'm going to do color range. Let's see if we can take it a step farther. Okay, so it's selected most of the grass and the log. Okay, so this slider here allows you to refine your selection. So to the left, it selects less colors. To the right, it expands it. Okay, so I want to get everything except that log, this post. So that looks pretty good. Okay, and I'm just going to darken like so. Remember, we need to have a little bit of contrast. So even though I've darkened, I want to keep the highlights a little bit bright, because otherwise you end up with a flat blob. So when you're dodging or darkening things, you want to make sure that you still maintain contrast within that object so that you don't make a big flat blob. Okay. So let's see how our bird looks now. So before, after. Okay. Now notice there is more color here. Okay, so there is more color in the grass than there was originally, and that was because we darkened it, right? So tone control. Tone control. The last thing I'm going to do is just add a little edge vignette. Let's do the low one. Right? And now your attention really goes to that bird, right? Great point, Vicky. Thank you for sharing that. Very helpful when editing and when taking the photos. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a really valid point. So a lot of the tone control and stuff that I'm doing here, if you could think about that when you're shooting. So for example, if I go back to the spider, okay, if I go back to the original image of the spider, okay, think about the tone control in terms of which things are in the background. Like maybe you wanted to get rid of that purple flower in the background, and just by moving your camera angle up a little bit, you could have eliminated that purple flower in the corner. Okay, so if I want to get rid of it, we can just crop a different way, right? Like so. But you could also have done that by changing your camera angle. So great tip, Vicky. Thanks for picking that up. Is there any other questions? I'd love to hear in the chat before we wrap up. I'm only going to do an hour today, so we're at the hour mark. I would love to hear one thing that you picked up today, or that I reminded you of that you had forgotten to use. So please put in the chat or in the comment area below the video if you're watching the replay. What did you learn by watching this today? Did you pick up at least one tip? Did I remind you to try flipping your image? Did I remind you to use masking? What is it that you got from today? And while you are doing that, I am just going to bring up some of our things again. And I just want to show you our store, because we have a lot of different things available for classes. And I'm going to show you all of them right now. So if you want learning on Photoshop, we're doing a Photoshop series. We just did 101, and we're going to be doing 201. You can see the new Neo class is available there. So if you just go to the website and hit store, you will get to this page or /store. Okay? So 201 will be available, or 201 is available now for purchase, Photoshop 201. And Photoshop 101 should be available in a couple of days. So check back here. If you missed that one, you will be able to buy that one and you'll get access to the recordings. If you attended or you bought it the other day, the recordings will be available for you. Rob is saying hopefully by Monday, right? Some other recent ones we did a while back, the HDR class and 10 ways to improve your overall image quality. If you decide you want that one, here's a little tip for you. There's a secret hiding place. If you go to the Photoshop 201 class page, you can actually bundle them. I'm going to give you a secret page. Haha. I'm going to give you a secret page. Oops. So Digital Photo Mentor / is it full Photoshop? Photoshop 201. Okay, so Digital Photo Mentor / Photoshop 201 will get you a bundle if you want to buy 2 of the classes. Okay, and they're both 50% off right now. So you can get Photoshop 201 and 10 ways to improve your image quality using this coupon for 50% off. So basically 2 for 1, $29. Let's see what everybody's learning today. Okay, Holly says, I never realized, never cleaned the back of my lens. Is it okay to use cleaner on the cloth on the back? Yes, it is. It's absolutely fine. Again, just make sure you're using a proper soft lens cleaner. And I sent you one, so you have a good one to use, and just be gentle. Okay, so yes, you can clean the back of your lens as well. Generally, they don't get as dirty, but you do have to check it every now and then. Okay. Using the refine slider on the color selection was new. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Anne. Shift double click on the blacks and whites when starting. What is the purpose of that? So the purpose of that is to do what's called setting the white points, Vivian. Okay, I'll just run through another one on that for you. So when you do that, I'll use this image for an example. Okay, so this image is actually fairly flat. Okay, there's not a lot of whites. There's no white because you can see it's not touching the right edge of the histogram, and there's no blacks. So when you do shift double click, it does what's called a white point set or a black point set for you automatically. Okay, so there's 2 ways to do that. Okay, so shift double click. Let's see how it moved the white slider, and now it's touching the edge. Shift double click. Now we have black. Okay, so instantly with 2 clicks, I was able to get contrast in this image. Okay. The other way to do it is to hold the Alt Option key and click the slider. And with the whites, you want to go until you get some clipping and then just dial it back. And guess what? We're at about the same point as when I shift double clicked. Okay. Same thing with the blacks, but with the blacks, you want to have a little bit of clipping. So I'm actually going to take it farther than shift double click went. Okay. So it's just a quick way to get those endpoints set. Great question, Vivian. Thank you for that. Vicky says, considering adding more sunflowers if you have some in the photo that are hard to clone out. Yes, actually, great. So I didn't do that on the one of the fence, but you certainly could, right? So if you do have a problem image, take it into Luminar and add some more. Go with it. It's the same as if you have a really grainy or noisy image because you had high ISO, add more grain. Don't try to get rid of it. Add more grain. Make it look like an old world film image, okay? Using the sliders to mask your selections. Okay, so same. Yeah, that was what Anne said as well. I'm not supposed to be doing that. What am I not supposed to be doing? Power of cropping to create a different perspective on the image and using Luminar and Lightroom in tandem. I do that a lot, Catherine. I really like Luminar for sort of finishing my image, as it were. Okay, so I like to finish my image. Awesome. You got the bundle. Perfect. Then we'll see you at Photoshop 201, Deb. Trish, reminded me that I've been meaning to set up my import and use a preset to remove chromatic aberration. Excellent. Okay, so what she's talking about is if you have chromatic aberration in a particular lens, you can actually even apply it just to certain lenses, but I have it turned on for everything. And because my camera does that automatically, right, the other thing you could do is actually buy our presets, and I have one that does that for you. And then you can apply that on import. Okay, so when you're importing your images, there's a place. Let me just go back here. Let me just do an import and show you where to pull that in. Now, I have a coffee date coming up here, so I'm just going to show you something real quick here. Okay, so if I want to pull these images in, it's not letting me. See where it says apply during import? Okay, that's where you can choose your presets. Okay, so now this is where you can choose lens corrections, apply profile. Okay, and that's in the import dialog box over here. Okay. Let's see. Cleaning the back of the lens, Stephanie says. Marguerite, I learned I can use a radial or linear gradient instead of the brush for creating a mask. Yeah, I almost never use the brush. And if you were in on the webinar that I did with Pete Vandenine, he hates the brush. He hates the brush. Also think about the color and the luminosity range, because then you can do things like select everything that's the same tone or color. Right? The tip to find the camera profiles, awesome. Shift double click makes your workflow processing faster. Yay! I'm so glad, Stephanie. Well, if you already have them, Trish, so just go to the import dialog box, and where it shows apply, just pull down that and you should be able to find my ones for, they're in the folder called import for presets for import. So I'll show you where to find them one more time just for you. Okay, so import. Select a source. Okay, I'm just going to pick something. Okay, where are we? I'm just trying to pick an image that's not already in Photoshop. Okay, let's just say I'm going to pick this one here. Okay, so over on the right, okay, normally I would be doing copy, not add, and you'll have more options. So if you're pulling in from, for example, if you're pulling in from your camera card, right? You're going to choose apply during import. And then the first pull down where it says develop settings, change that from none. Look for DPM basic settings for import. Okay. And they all have the lens corrections. Okay. So you can apply just the first one, which is just lens corrections. It's looking through my whole catalog of images. Or you can apply ones with clarity and a vignette and contrast and so on. Okay, so if you just want the chromatic aberration, that's the first one. Okay, let me get out of here because it's scanning my entire hard drive for new images. All right, so just a reminder, I'm going to bring this back up on here again. I still have a few images left, but do please continue to submit. I got one from Deb this week. Please send in some more images. As always, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and invite a friend. If all of you invite one friend to come and join you next week, we'll have twice as many people and twice as many images and twice as much fun. So I hope to see you again next week, and join me on my next classes as well. Take care.